Hello, friends. I'm Rob Mason. This is Reverend Ginger Brandt, and we are here at First Christian Church in Tyler talking about spiritual disciplines and practices. We've started this project during the season of Lent in 2024, and we're meeting with a small group to kind of work through these practices and maybe find a way that works for us as individuals to deepen our spiritual experience, deepen our spiritual connection to God and to others. And we decided to make a few videos about the practices we've been going through this year so that you can encounter these anytime and maybe find something that helps you to deepen your spiritual connection. This is the last video that we're making, but it may not be the last one that you encounter. But
we're weaving a lot of threads together right here and now.
If it is, then you've seen things about prayer and fasting and hospitality and
spiritual reading,
personal examination, and spiritual reading, and how these things can help you to encounter God's Spirit in a more meaningful way than the way we usually do it, which is by accident. So we're talking about intentional ways of doing this. And so this
great lead in.
Right, we're talking about worship as a spiritual discipline. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the ways in which worship isn't a spiritual discipline. I'll just say that
the ways we don't let it be, right?
I'll just say that the reasons people might come to church on a Sunday morning to worship are myriad, numerous and varied, and not all of those things are about creating that connection to God and to others through the Holy Spirit. But so what we want to try to talk about today is how to prepare yourself, how to come into worship, be intentional about creating that spiritual connection. When I was thinking about this, I thought about how in our contemporary society, a lot of people talk about being spiritual but not religious. Being religious is often connected to being a part of a church or going to church. I think it's kind of an artificial contrast because certainly going to church, being a part of a community, coming to worship, those things can be spiritual practices if you set out to make it be that way.
Right. Which I think starts with intention, right? So I think that's the first thing we talk about. When you want to make your worship more spirit-filled and spiritual. So just ask yourself, why are you here? Start with that thought as soon as you get settled in the room.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that's a good point, which I should have made. Why do we worship? What is it about? Because then all the elements of the worship, whether it's the music or the preaching or the praying or the whatever it is, communion, those things then can take on a different meaning. So, I don't know. What are some of the things about worship that you think increase that spiritual connection?
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'll answer this personally and then maybe corporately. I think I always need music and prayer to get into the worship. I also do show up to worship as a social function, so I think there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to be really honest and own it. You know, some of my greatest friends go to church, and sometimes I'm going to church to see my friends, and that's okay. But asking myself, why am I here? I think I seek more of what God has. I seek to be more, to both feel more of what God has, to experience more, and to be more of what God is. So I think the things that we do first, specifically in our worship, really help me focus and then refocus throughout the hour. Some of the things are very simple, like singing along, lighting a candle during a time of prayer. Those are simple little acts, but they can pull you in deeper, I think. And that's important, to let yourself focus on the small things that are happening right in front of you. If your mind starts to wander, you refocus. And also what you do the acts that you're doing, like lighting a candle, pretty simple thing, it gets refocused through the lens of where you are and who you're with. So I can light a candle at my own house, in my own kitchen, absolutely.
Right, yeah.
But when I do it in that room, in the setting of corporate worship, which is just meaning not by myself, with other people,
Right.
that simple act becomes different.
Right. It's a communal activity. You were saying earlier when we were talking just that sometimes when you come, maybe you don't experience that spiritual connection. Maybe you don't
True.
get
Absolutely true.
that much out of it. But it could be that worship service wasn't for you. It didn't speak directly to you.
Yeah.
It may have spoken directly to someone else. But since worship is a communal activity, that's part of that spiritual connection, is that it spoke to somebody else.
Might not be for you today.
Right. It was important for them. It was a part of their journey, and we are all a part of their journey because we're worshiping corporately, because we're worshiping communally.
Because we're one
together.
body, right? We're professing that we're one body when we enter this room and do this thing.
Right. That's a big part of that contrast between religious and spiritual. Is the idea that I can be spiritual on my own. I suppose I can, but part of entering into the realm of the Holy Spirit is understanding that everyone else is also filled with that
The same
spirit,
spirit, yeah.
breath,
Yeah.
life, and I am a part of a larger communion.
Yeah.
And so coming to worship
Yeah.
reinforces that.
Yeah. I love that we remember to say sometimes you're not going to feel it. Some worship services, you just don't feel it. I think it's okay to be honest about that. And here's a little tip that has helped me. I always look around the room and just ask myself, who might it have been for if not for me? I don't need a specific answer. I don't need maybe a face to jump out at me, but I might think, there's a small person enjoying it. Maybe today's service was for children. Maybe today's service was for somebody older than me, younger than me, different, going through a different thing than me. But considering who else it might have been for, who's either a type or someone in the room, I think it kind of loosens my frustration if I'm not feeling it. And it opens up my ability to celebrate what's going on in the room. Because the whole people of God is receiving worship, and I can celebrate for someone else who's having a great time there today.
Right. Yeah. So, to make it, I don't know if this makes it more personal, but this is just an example for me. Some of the things we've talked about before, like the personal examination, coming into worship, can I give it some thought to where I may be a little out of place? Where am I off kilter? What am I missing? And maybe the communal worship can help me to get back into that right place, right? To that relationship with God that I was hoping to have, and where I messed it up this week. Or prayer, how can I listen for God's response during that time of prayer? Or how can I listen for a word from God while Ginger is preaching? Or, music is a very powerful, emotional way to connect to these kinds of ideas. Am I connecting to God through that musical expression?
Yeah.
I think communion for us is a huge deal, where it brings in these ideas of welcoming and hospitality and making room for others, because the table is not just mine, it belongs to everybody, and everybody is welcome. It's big enough to host everybody. So thinking about those things, approaching it in that way, helps me to be connected to the other people in the room and more connected to God. Right.
So in a way, you've kind of given up the scorecard that one could take into anything you do, including worship. You could kind of be keeping score about, did that please me? Did that hit me? Was that, did that feel good to me? And instead, you could just be experiencing a thing with other people and letting the thing be what it is.
Yeah.
We know this has been a bit of a nebulous conversation. This is kind of a big theoretical thing with less practical application. But to kind of review where we think we might have some practical tips for you to guide you deeper into worship. Think intention. When you show up, why are you here? And set an intention that you're gonna focus on what's happening in the room more than any other distraction of the day. So set an intention, focus and refocus. Just jump back in. If your mind wanders, get back into the room and don't settle for a mind that makes a shopping list for a solid hour. Allow the things you do to refocus you, the things that happen in the room to refocus you on Christ and community. Where do we pick up?
Be aware, right? We believe that God is present in that space. Mm-hmm. So be aware of that presence and on the lookout for it and in touch with it when it comes through.
Perfect.
When you notice it, then just to be aware of it. And then let those things, your intention and your awareness, let those things be your pilot. Let those things steer your soul in a new direction as you leave worship and go back out into the world. That's
transformative. Yeah,
that's kind of the three things. Be intentional, be aware, and then be the change. Not to borrow.
Okay, well, we just summed it all up. That's what you get today in conversation about worship. We hope some of it was useful, helpful, practical, and we hope we'll see you again for future series right in this place. Thanks, friends.